So I'm here today to announce the government's plan with regard to short-term holiday letting. Our plan will allow local economies to thrive, while at the same time cracking down on bad behaviour. We are about to introduce the toughest laws in the world when it comes to bad behaviour. Under our 2 strikes and you're out policy, hosts or guests who commits 2 serious breaches of the Code of Conduct in 2 years will be banned from all platforms for 5 years. These will be the toughest laws in the world. New South Wales Fair Trading will appoint independent adjudicators to assess complaints against the Code of Conduct and will maintain an online register of strikes. There will be significant financial penalties that apply for businesses that breach the Code of Conduct of up to $1.1 million and for individuals of $220,000. As I said, these will be the toughest laws against sharing platforms in the world to crack down on bad behaviour. In addition to that, we recognise the important role that owners' corporations play in governing strata schemes in New South Wales. That's why we're proposing to allow strata schemes and owners' corporations to pass a bylaw restricting the use of short-term holiday letting if the property is not someone's primary place of residence, provided that the majority of 75% vote that way. As I said, we've consulted broadly with stakeholders, industry groups, and of course my parliamentary colleagues. And I'm confident that we've got the policy right that will enable short-term letting to occur in New South Wales, but at the same time, protecting people's property rights and ensuring that owners' corporations can continue to have a say in how strata schemes are governed. I'll now hand over to Minister Roberts.
Look, thank you, Minister Keane. The strata laws are incredibly complex, and I'd like to congratulate Minister Keane and the work he's done dealing with the stakeholders across New South Wales in ensuring that we land correctly. As far as planning is concerned, what we want to see is a seamless unification of planning laws in conjunction with strata laws and the new legislation. As such, with respect to the ability to have permissible development in this area, in the Greater Sydney area, which is defined by the Greater Sydney Commission, permissible development is an amount of up to 180 days per year, whereas out of Greater Sydney it will be 360 days per year. How did we arrive at this? First and foremost, in Greater Sydney itself, if you add up school holidays, long weekends and weekends, it almost arrives at that figure. It's a figure used in Tokyo for permissibility of short-term letting stays. But also what we've tried to do is ensure that in Sydney itself there aren't any unintended consequences, for example, how it may affect or not affect rental affordability. And that's why there's a 12-month study being done, and we'll report back in 12 months to see how it's travelling outside of Sydney. As Jeff Provost will tell you, it's a little bit different. There are some areas that have 365 days per year permissibility, will be incredibly welcomed. There are others that a little bit less might be more welcomed, and that's why we're allowing councils outside of Greater Sydney the option and the flexibility to reduce that 365 days down to a flooring of 180 days. But all in all, this has been, I think, very much a great landing for a very complex issue.
Well, sorry, can you just explain, so why have you put a cap on in Sydney and not in regional areas?
Well, for example, there are different wants and needs within Sydney and the broader New South Wales community, regional communities, where quite often, for example, in Jeff Provost's area, there's a couple of thousand dwellings that are let in this manner. Sydney has a huge rental market. We don't want to see any unintended consequences with respect to allowing more than 180 days. We think 180 days is a good landing. It's more or less what is used overseas. It's a little bit more generous than some places, but we believe it's landed quite well at 180 days here, and we'll see how it goes over the next 12 months, where we'll be able to get further studies done and more quantifiable research done on this.
But if you had more than 180 days in Sydney, wouldn't that then effectively, that just increases the competition in the market, which is better for people that are wanting to rent, which is better for people that are trying to find properties, that you've got effectively more places to stay. Like it doesn't have a negative impact on people wanting to rent. It has a negative impact obviously on people who own hotels and that kind of thing.
Well, we're not sure about that at the moment, to be quite frank with you. I mean, if you're in the rental market for more than 3 months at a time, this may affect you. And that's why we're having a look in Sydney. There are enough short-term stays in Sydney, we believe, to cover the marketplace as it is. It's outside of Sydney where you have some communities that rely very heavily on having a short-term stays marketplace and a rental ability there 365 days a year. And can I make it quite clear that this does not affect people who are owner-occupiers. So if you're a gentleman or a lady or a couple that rent a room out in your home to people that stay from overseas, this does not in any way affect your ability to do that.
Minister Keane, we know that the strata part of this policy wasn't in the original one you took to the party room. Can you admit now that you should have taken it to the backbench committee and consulted with your colleagues more?
Look, there's no doubt about that. This has been a complex issue. We've been grappling with how to regulate this industry for a little over 2 years. There was a parliamentary inquiry, there was an options paper, we had over 8,000 submissions to the options paper, and there was genuinely a diversity of opinion, not only just across the community, but across the party room. I'm confident that our reforms, our proposals, which give owners corporations the ability to pass a bylaw with a 75% majority restricting short-term holiday letting where a property is not someone's primary place of abode, has got the balance right. We've got the balance right between protecting people's property rights, between recognising that owners corporations have a role to play in the governance of strata schemes, and ensuring that people that want to use these platforms like Airbnb are able to do so.
But you
How
now,
are you gonna
you now
regulate?
admit that it was a mistake not to take it to the backbench committee before taking it to the party room?
Look, I'm not going to apologise for consulting widely, especially with my colleagues. I've consulted with the diversity of our party room, whether they be national or liberal. Just remember, this is not a one-size-fits-all policy. Short-term holiday letting affects different communities differently, and that's why we've made amendments to allow owners corporations to have a say in whether or not short-term holiday letting can occur in strata schemes.
How will you police that? How will you know if someone's rented their place out more than 180 days?
So I'll hand that to Minister Roberts because it's a planning issue, but one thing that we will do is give Fair Trading the powers, we'll appoint independent adjudicators that will assess complaints for breaches of bad behaviour. Fair Trading will assess those complaints and determine whether or not a strike is issued, and they will maintain an online register of strikes. If companies or platforms want to breach the code of conduct or the strikes policy, then there'll be significant financial penalties that apply, which Fair Trading will uphold.
But that relies on people dobbing them in. Isn't there going to be some sort of register or registration process that these people are going to have to take part in?
What we're proposing is to have a negative licensing scheme. So Fair Trading will maintain a register where people have breached the code of conduct and a strike has been recorded against their name. I don't intend on setting up a whole new bureaucracy to deal with this. We can deal with this in a modern way using data collected from the platforms where Fair Trading will be able to monitor what's going on and work with councils to police and enforce our planning laws. I'll hand over to Ms.
Can I just ask just quickly, what constitutes a strike? Is that to do with the code or like what?
So what we're proposing, I'm looking to pass legislation in the coming weeks, an amendment to the Fair Trading Act, which will make the Code of Conduct mandatory in New South Wales. That Code of Conduct will be developed in consultation with the stakeholders, industry groups and interested parties. The Code of Conduct will deal with things that like antisocial behaviour, anything that interferes with people's right to, or neighbours' right to peacefully enjoy their homes. That will be my view on what a strike will constitute.
Look, with respect to 180 days, of course, we'll be utilising that data that is supplied by platforms already. This is what occurs overseas, and working closely with those suppliers, particularly the larger organisations, to ensure that we, together with the rest of government, take a whole of government approach to ensure that if people are going over 180 days, then it's no longer permissible use, or they need to go below 365 days, where we'll be able to work with local councils together with Fair Trading on that.
So we'll be looking at that information across platforms. Like, will there be anything to stop, say, somebody putting up their home on Airbnb for 180 nights and then stays for 180 nights, hoping that that will avoid detection?
Well, the beauty about data collection these days is it's rather complex, but it's incredibly effective, and that means that we can marry up data from one platform with data from another platform at the same time.
Who's gonna do that, though?
Many people, I would suggest computers do that quite effectively. Many people already advertise across a number of platforms, and the ability to bring those together and actually get a figure is not unusual and it's not difficult. Again, what we're doing here, and the crux of this, is to ensure that we have a thriving short-term letting marketplace. And can I just say again, there is nothing new to this. People have been taking in boarders into their homes for generations. After the Great War, war widows fed their families by taking in boarders into their homes. And so nothing has changed here except the platforms on which these are promoted. When I was growing up last century and before that, one would go to the newspaper if one wanted to rent a flat or a home for a short period of time. Now that's changed. It's instantaneous. It's there on the phone, and we'll be utilising that data that enables people to actually rent a place to ensure that the person that is renting that place out abides by the rules and regulations.
So is Airbnb open to sharing its data with the New South Wales government? I've agreed to...
Well, I've got to say that this is a huge coup for the Minister, and I'll let the Minister answer that. You should take congratulations for that.
So we'll be requiring platforms like Airbnb. We'll be requiring all platforms that are looking to host short-term rental accommodation in New South Wales to sign up to our mandatory code of conduct, which will include requiring them to share their data with Fair Trading and the Department of Planning.
What happens if they don't sign up and then they have to stop practicing and withdraw from the market?
Well, that will be outside the law in New South Wales, and there'll be significant financial penalties that apply. If a platform doesn't adhere to the mandatory code of conduct, then our significant fines of up to $1.1 million for corporations and $220,000 for individuals will apply.
Given that this process has taken so long, how long do you think it'll take to get to that code of conduct?
We're going to get to work on the code of conduct straight away. I want to see it enforced as soon as possible. Just remember that short-term rental accommodation is currently operating in New South Wales completely unregulated. So there's no way that you can crack down on bad behaviour, or if you have a party house next door, you can do anything about it. These laws will change that, and they are up there with the toughest laws in the world. It will make a difference to neighbours who currently have their peace and quiet disturbed by party houses, and it will also provide certainty to the industry who want to continue to grow in this state.
So if someone's living next door to a party house, do they just call the police and then they can be guaranteed there won't be any more parties?
So currently there are laws in place to deal with bad behaviour or antisocial behaviour. Currently you can call the police, but what we're doing is giving real teeth that will crack down on bad behaviour for people who use short-term rental accommodation. That means that if you do the wrong thing, whether you're a guest or a host on one of these platforms, and Fair Trading upholds one of the strikes against the code of conduct, if you have 2 strikes in 2 years, you'll be kicked off all platforms in New South Wales for 5.
And so just in terms of the strata powers that you've given owners corporations, there will be some investors who aren't very happy because potentially they're facing, their strata owners corporation saying, no, actually you can't use your investment property for short-term rentals. You acknowledge that there will be some unhappy investors.
I think that we've got the balance right. Just remember in New South Wales, a 75% majority vote by owners corporations can wind up a strata scheme. So we've set a high threshold, but a threshold that nonetheless gives owners corporations the ability to continue to have control over the governance of their buildings. I'm confident that we've got the balance right between ensuring that people are able to use short-term holiday letting in New South Wales, whilst at the same time protecting people's property rights.
Now, can we get 100% tweet?
Okay. Yeah, no, look, I welcome the announcement by Minister Roberts and Minister Keane. In my particular area, we have over 2,000 properties, and the tweet has actually grown up on holiday letting. It's been around for many, many years, and there's a lot of mum and dad's investors involved in it, not only in units but also in residential houses. And I can give you many cases of particularly widows that have taken in boarders from our universities and tourists that actually supplement their incomes with it. And there's been a large level of uncertainty. Council has put a moratorium on taking action up there, although they have taken action on some areas. But also we've had a couple of cases of party houses. I guess we get that down from the Gold Coast. And this new system gives certainty to those those neighbours, but it also gives certainties to the industry, and it's there. I consider it very similar to Uber. The market moved in that way, and it's been a great plus for my town. Apart from those investors and those mums and dads, there's a tremendous, there'd be at least 500-600 people directly in terms of cleaning, maintaining, and then you get the flow-on effect in the tourism trade. So it's a great plus, and it's very welcome news.
Thank you. We've got a question time.
Minister King, just very quickly with the 12 months.
Sure.
How will that work at the end of the 12 months? If you do identify any problems or issues, like what will you be looking at? What will happen to people who have been fined this year? Like if they get fined in 6 months' time and then some of the rules change, how will that work?
So what we're looking at is reviewing how this policy works for the next 12 months. We are determined to make decisions based on evidence. By being able to collect the data from the platforms, we'll be able to ensure that we've got the policy settings right, and if tweaks need to occur as a result of that, then we will consider it based on the evidence, based on the data.
Just some questions for the planning minister on a different topic.
Well, as long as you're quick. I'm
Just-
also
yes,
leader
yeah.
of the House.
Yeah, just for new Sydney suburbs, are you confident you can get the infrastructure there to make it work?
Oh, with new Sydney suburbs, we're just not confident of getting the infrastructure there to make them work. We are doing it. We're investing more money than any generation before us in providing infrastructure for new suburbs, and we'll be spending more on infrastructure, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. This is a government that has done more through providing key transport infrastructure together with schools, hospitals, police stations, all those services, either concurrently or before these communities are built. And that's something we're very proud of.
So you don't feel like you need to slow down to allow infrastructure to catch up at all?
Can I say that any person who has visited one of our new communities will see the amount of infrastructure spend that occurs before people even move in. The new fields, new schools, the new roads, the connectivity to major train stations and networks. That's a great thing that's occurring each and every day. And I can say that never before has that been seen. And we'll continue to roll out that infrastructure as we build and develop these new communities. Thank you. Thank you.